Welcome back to Comic Cappers. Today we will be capping the fourth issue of Absolute Martian Manhunter, where the lines between John Jones and the alien entity consuming his mind finally begin to blur into total, terrifying chaos. With that said, grab a snack, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. The Martian entity begins to assert its influence, literally reaching out to manipulate the sun, turning the sky into a weapon of pure, oppressive heat. It's a terrifying visual metaphor. The entity isn't just inhabiting John Jones, it's actively reshaping the environment to serve its clinical, destructive agenda. Down in the streets, the heatwave is pushing Middleton to its breaking point. As the city swelters, the tension is palpable. The sound of a simple coffee cup being crushed, a sharp, jarring choff, serves as the catalyst, signaling that the civility of this neighborhood is about to evaporate entirely. The narrator warns us. Bridget is at her breaking point, the text superimposed over her face. Words like absent, bad husband, and not happy perfectly captures the psychological weight of her marriage collapsing. She's not just asking for a conversation, she's demanding reality. John immediately deflects, using the chaos in Middleton as a shield. He's cold, clinical, and clearly not present in his own life, even as he tries to play the role of the devoted FBI agent. When Bridget confronts him about his lies, the internal Martian entity actually interrupts their dialogue with a chilling, detached false, effectively gaslighting her in real time. It's a masterclass in domestic horror. He's treating his own wife like an obstacle to be managed rather than a partner. John walks out, leaving Bridget alone in the heat. He doesn't even look back, his silhouette already consumed by the Martian's influence. He promises to return, but the way he's already checking out of their life makes it clear. The man Bridget married is effectively gone. The sheer absurdity of the violence in Middleton is laid bare. The Martian entity catalogs the carnage, broken bones, permanent injuries, and property damage as if it were a simple inventory report rather than a human tragedy. We shift to a crime scene where the cause of this chaos is revealed to be laughably petty. A cop on the scene notes the irony. All this destruction started over a simple spilled cup of coffee. John Jones stands in the background, his expression unreadable, a silent witness to the breakdown of his own city. The Martian entity shifts its focus to the sky, describing the sun in terms that reflect its own cynical, distorted worldview, traffic jams, abuse, and hypocrisy. John's sunglasses catch the blinding light, masking his eyes as the entity contemplates its next move, appearing almost resigned to the misery it's causing. Finally, the entity labels its own manipulation of the sun as Bad Idea 8429, White Heat of War, confirming it is actively experimenting with Middleton's reality as a sick laboratory. John Jones stands amidst the sweltering Middleton heat, casually discussing the city's psychological breakdown with a local officer. While the cop complains about the temperature, the Martian entity inside John is thinking about something far more clinical, the structural integrity of reality itself, which it views as a machine requiring repair. The officer is clearly exhausted, barely processing John's detached, cryptic commentary as the heat continues to push everyone to their breaking point. The conversation shifts to a former colleague, Mayweather, who has vanished from the force. John's calm admission that he doesn't blame him for quitting highlights just how far gone the environment has become. A haunting close-up of a surreal, glowing evidence bag in a distorted, otherworldly shape underscores the alien presence while the officer rides away, oblivious to the true nature of the man she was just speaking with. As the officer departs, the lingering psychic toll of the encounter is laid bare, confirming that the Martian's influence is a literal infection. John Jones is driving through a vibrant, multicultural Middleton, but his perspective is warped. He views the city's diversity not as a melting pot, but as an overwhelming, chaotic garden of clashing viewpoints. As he cruises through the streets, the Martian entity scoffs at the city's reputation as a sanctuary. It views the idea of a city of second chances as a cruel joke, highlighting the impossibility of displaced people ever truly finding peace. Focusing in on John's glasses, we see the true, fractured nature of his existence. The reflection shows the city's complex reality, while the caption reveals the Martian's growing, cynical understanding of how hard humans work just to tolerate their neighbors. Despite the mounting tension, we see a snapshot of communal joy as kids play in a fire hydrant spray. The Martian considers this miraculous, yet fundamentally mundane, a fleeting moment of humanity before its plan for total destruction fully takes hold. John Jones continues his grim assessment of the neighborhood, noting that despite the city's attempts at harmony, the veneer is cracking. Happy Heart Lane has become a literal powder keg. As the heat wave intensifies, the residents aren't just angry, they are literally steaming with rage, their frustration manifesting as a physical whistling vapor that promises nothing but violence. John watches from the sidelines, lighting a cigarette as the Martian entity acknowledges the escalation. It's not just a riot, it's a calculated signal of intent, with the entity effectively pulling the strings of the local chaos. Under that blinding, Martian-induced bone-white light, the dark undercurrents of the neighborhood boil over. Long-buried prejudices which these people had worked so hard to suppress are now being violently forced to the surface. In the quiet aftermath of the day's aggression, we find John lying in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. The distance between him and Bridget has never felt more absolute. John Jones is officially out of the house. The marital bond is severed, and he's left to navigate the wreckage of his human life in the shadows of a city tearing itself apart. 12 days into this relentless heatwave, the divide between neighbors has become a literal front line. What was once a simple patch of grass on Coolidge Road is now a fortified combat zone. Two families who spent decades sharing beers and watching their kids grow up are now locked in a lethal property dispute. It's a tragic, explosive descent into tribalism, as Matt Galvers and Calvin Hill trade gunfire and dehumanizing insults over a few feet of dirt, proving just how fragile their community really was. The neighborhood war on Coolidge Road has settled into a grim, systematic routine. These families aren't just arguing anymore. They've militarized their own backyards, patrolling makeshift walls and 8-hour shifts like they're in a trench. The most haunting part, it's not just the adults. The rot has reached the next generation as even the kids are dragged into this paranoid armed standoff. John Jones, or rather, the entity piloting his body, is actively trying to intervene. It's a clinical, almost detached attempt at therapy. The entity realizes the sun warping hasn't broken them completely, so it tries to force empathy by projecting memories. It reminds Matt Galvers of the genuine kindness the Hill family showed during his wife's cancer battle, the meal trains, the lawn care, the support that once defined their friendship. Then it flips the script, forcing the Hills to relive the moment Galvers saved their son Mikey from a near-fatal accident. The entity is weaponizing their own history against them, desperately trying to see if human sentiment can overwrite the hatred it's currently cultivating. But look at the silhouette. Despite all the colorful psychic attempts to bridge the gap, the reality is stark. John, or whatever this thing is looming over the wreckage like a shadow, completely detached from the humanity it's ostensibly trying to save. The heatwave is no longer just a weather event, it's a catalyst for total societal collapse. By day 13, the violence has become systematic, with 13 unprovoked police shootings in a single day. We see the raw, brutal reality of this escalation, officers firing point-blank into vehicles without hesitation. The aggression is relentless, the officers gripped by a mindless, violent frenzy as they unload their weapons. It's a terrifying snapshot of a city losing its grip, where authority has devolved into pure, unadulterated hostility. Back in the interrogation rooms, the atmosphere is suffocating. The police are unrepentant, drowning in their own twisted justifications while the Martian entity watches, clinical and cold, feeding off the psychic residue of their rage. Meanwhile, the families of the victims aren't just mourning, they're hardening. Outrage is giving way to cold, calculated plans for retaliation, turning the city's grief into a ticking time bomb. Even in the quiet of a dinner table, the tension is palpable, the shadow of the Martian entity looming over the normalcy of a family meal as the city prepares to burn. Beyond the immediate urban unrest, the Martian entity's influence continues to warp the fabric of Middleton, casting a long, dark shadow over even the most mundane settings. The chaos shifts to a bowling alley, where a trivial dispute over a footfault escalates into an explosive brawl. The Martian's influence is thick here, quite literally manifesting as the same suffocating thought smoke that haunts John. Amidst the flying debris and shattered pins, the violence is punctuated by a guttural, desperate cry. The game has truly ended, replaced by pure, unbridled rage. Finally, we cut to a haunting, quiet aftermath. A figure lies collapsed on a couch, the silence of the scene a stark, unsettling contrast to the carnage we just witnessed. Bridget stands in their home, her posture radiating frustration as she stares at a dark, amorphous mass of thought smoke swirling in the living room. The domestic space is rapidly becoming a prison of psychic residue. The Martian entity, a vibrant, multicolored god figure hovering above the city, pours white smoke down onto the populace, inciting a brutal sectarian war between two nearly identical churches. John Jones, cigarette dangling from his lip, observes the madness through reflective glasses. He notes the absurdity of the conflict, as the two factions fight over the technicality of baptism, while the Martian's influence renders their original differences meaningless. Violence erupts as the two groups clash with swords and maces, their faces contorted in irrational, smoke-fueled hate. John stands amidst the chaos, his presence marked by the signature green smoke. He stares directly into the blinding light of the sun, or perhaps the source of his own corruption, when a voice breaks his trance. Bridget confronts him, demanding he stop staring into the abyss before he blinds himself. She has reached her limit, her final plea echoing the end of their partnership. "Enough, John," as he turns to walk away. Bridget has finally cornered John, her frustration boiling over as she refuses to let him slip away again. John turns, his back to her, clearly struggling to maintain his human facade as the psychological pressure mounts. He attempts to deflect, deploying the same gaslighting tactics that have defined his recent behavior, claiming she's just imagining the distance between them. Bridget isn't buying it, her tired, bruised eyes cutting right through his excuses. She reminds him of the partnership he's systematically destroying. John retreats into his only remaining comfort, the ritual of the cigarette. The sound of the lighter is the only response he can muster. He stares ahead, his face a mask of detached, alien indifference. Bridget stands firm, her anger hardening into a cold, focused resolve. John stammers a weak, unconvincing confirmation of their partnership, his voice lacking any genuine conviction. He stares blankly, his mind clearly elsewhere, likely tethered to the Martian entity's broader, destructive agenda. Bridget finally asks the question that's been haunting their home: where has he actually been? She watches him, waiting for a truth he is no longer capable of giving. He remains silent, a broken man being piloted by a cold, cosmic observer. The sun beats down on the house, an external manifestation of the Martian's heat-warped reality. John's hands reach out toward the blinding light as the entity within him continues its work, completely indifferent to the human life he's leaving in ruins. Bridget's voice rings out as she recounts the foundation of her life with John, a life built on a silent, psychic understanding that has now been shattered. She describes the intimacy of simply looking into his eyes, a connection that once felt as natural as breathing. She recalls how that gaze allowed her to read his very thoughts and feelings, a deep, wordless bond that defined their marriage. The imagery shifts, becoming abstract and alien, as we see the Martian entity's influence beginning to warp that once pure perception. Deep within the pupil, the terrifying truth is revealed. The Martian entity, cold and calculating, has been watching from behind the mask of John's humanity all along. Bridget's own eye reflects this horrifying discovery, her perspective on her husband forever fractured as she realizes the language she once read is now a lie. She reflects on how that connection felt like a secret language, one only she could interpret, which made their bond feel impenetrable. It is this profound history that makes the current betrayal so devastating. She never had reason to doubt him until now. Her voice falters as she touches on the core of her pain, the uncertainty regarding his true feelings toward her. We see John, or the shell he has become, looking away, the psychic smoke drifting from him like a physical manifestation of his detachment. She struggles to articulate the final, crushing blow, her fear for their son, Tyler, and whether John's love for them was ever real. He stands there, a hollow man, as a cigarette drops from his hand, the last symbol of his humanity dissolving into a mess of color on the floor. John's attempt to gaslight Bridget reaches a fever pitch. As he speaks, the psychic thought smoke explodes into a blinding, cosmic nebula that fills the panel, effectively drowning out the domestic space with the raw, chaotic power of the Martian entity. Bridget is visually overwhelmed by this display, her expression shifting from hurt to sheer existential terror as the alien presence asserts itself. The scene snaps back to a tight, claustrophobic focus on John's face. He's still smoking, his features bandaged and bruised, looking up at his wife with a hollow, manipulative stare that suggests he's testing to see if she still buys the act. In a final, pathetic display of his failing human charade, John kneels and clings to Bridget. It's a desperate, performative gesture of intimacy that rings completely false, underscoring the absolute chasm between the man she remembers and the entity currently wearing his skin. Bridget's realization hits a breaking point. She's looking down at John, physically holding onto him, but the emotional connection is severed. She tells him point blank. We shift to a stark, stylized image of the Martian entity, a cold, green-skinned figure, deliberately snapping a white rod in half. It's a visual metaphor for the destruction of their bond, the entity literally breaking the support structures of John's human life. In a yellow-hued inset, we see a figure working meticulously at a desk, surrounded by mundane objects. The clinical precision of the task highlights the entity's detached, methodical nature compared to the messy human emotions Bridget is feeling. Another inset, this time bathed in blue, shows a bearded man handling wires. It's a quiet, cold moment that emphasizes the distance between John's current state and the warmth of his past. Finally, a magenta inset shows a figure adjusting a headpiece. These quick, color-coded flashes feel like the entity cycling through personas or memories, further isolating the real John behind a wall of alien artifice. Back in the bedroom, the intimacy is completely gone. Bridget's face is a mask of grief and confusion as she delivers the crushing verdict. John's response is chillingly hollow. As he stares up at her, his face is already shifting into the green, alien visage of the Martian. He maintains the lie with a flat, robotic insistence. Bridget is reaching her absolute limit, her frustration boiling over into a raw confrontation. She demands to know why their lives were uprooted so suddenly, but John, or what's left of him, hides behind the bureaucratic mask of the Bureau. We shift to a surreal, abstract visualization of the Martian entity. It's stretching a white, formless substance, a visual metaphor for how it's pulling at the fabric of John's reality and his marriage to keep him compliant. This alien manipulation continues with a bizarre, colorful sequence of shapes. It's as if the entity is tuning the frequency of their reality, systematically stripping away anything that feels human or grounded. Bridget pours out her grief, detailing the isolation they've faced since moving. She's mourning their lost life in DC and the fact that their friends have completely cut them off. It's a desperate plea for a truth that John just can't or won't provide. Bridget snaps. Her eyes are wide, furious, and radiating a deep internal heat. She confronts him one last time, demanding to know why he's hiding the truth. John's response is pathetic. He's hollowed out, stammering, I don't know why. It's the admission of a man who has completely lost the wheel. That's the final straw. Bridget doesn't just walk away. She lashes out, delivering a sharp slap that physically punctuates the end of their connection. John is completely checked out, his internal monologue revealing that while he and Bridget are at each other's throats, the entity inside him is treating the sun like a puzzle, clicking it into place with cold, mechanical precision. Bridget is clearly exhausted, leaning against the window with thought smoke curling from her head. She recounts the trust she once had in their marriage, admitting she always excused his secrecy because she believed his work was for their benefit. That trust is gone. She bitterly adds the realization that she was wrong to ever assume she understood his motives. John tries to pivot back to his tired excuse, stuttering that this is all for their protection, but it rings hollow, especially with the massive, looming silhouette of the entity darkening the horizon behind their home. We cut to a jarring, discordant beat. A lone figure in tactical gear walks toward a vehicle, the chip-chip sound effect emphasizing the clinical, militarized atmosphere taking over the city. Inside the car, a bearded man in goggles stares ahead, his expression unreadable and detached, perfectly mirroring the coldness spreading through Middleton. Another figure, bathed in harsh magenta light, grips the steering wheel, signaling that the entire city is now being piloted toward a violent, inevitable collision. Bridget is reaching her breaking point, her frustration boiling over into open hostility as she realizes John is using the same tired, manipulative gaslighting tactics to avoid the truth. We cut to the suffocating landscape of Middleton, where the industrial smog from the nuclear plant hangs heavy over the city, a visual manifestation of the toxicity growing between the couple. The city's decay continues, shifting to the coal plant. The sky is bruised and dark, mirroring how John's human identity is being completely choked out by the Martian entity's influence. A third industrial site, the gas plant, glows in an unnatural, sickly magenta hue, signaling that the entire city is being systematically poisoned by the entity's presence. Back on the rooftop, the Martian entity is fully revealed, laughing at the chaos below. It's a cold, detached sound, the sound of a predator watching its prey destroy itself from the inside out. The entity sits in silence, looking out over the sprawling, light-polluted landscape under a crescent moon, completely indifferent to the human tragedy unfolding just feet away. Returning to the confrontation, Bridget grabs John's face, desperate to force a genuine reaction, but John is still trying to deflect, unable to even admit who or what he really is. Bridget finally draws the line, her voice cold and steady against the backdrop of the city's literal explosion. As the shockwave of the blast ripples through the air, Bridget delivers the final, crushing blow. The silence is deafening. We zoom in on John's eyes, or what's left of them, as the Martian entity's influence creates a terrifying, hollow vacancy that confirms her worst fears. John is left reeling, his human composure finally shattering as he stares at the wreckage of his marriage. He can only muster a pathetic, hollow wah as he realizes he's completely lost his grip on the life he tried to build. The Martian entity takes over, its cold, internal monologue cutting through the confusion with clinical detachment. It dismisses the entire human drama as a misunderstanding and a stupid mistake, revealing that all the heat and light we've seen were nothing more than a shiny distraction. As the city of Middleton burns in the distance, the truth is laid bare. The chaos was never about the sun or the heat. The darkness was the white Martian's true intent all along. The issue ends here, leaving us in the shadow of a much larger, darker invasion. And that unfortunately concludes our comic cap for today. With the Martian entity finally shedding the facade of John's domestic life, do you think Bridget is now the biggest threat to its plan, or is she just collateral damage in this new era of darkness? Let me know your answer in the comments section down below. Be sure to subscribe and press that notification bell for daily comic caps. Until next time, take care, brush your hair, I'll see you when I see you, peace.